We want to look at Photoshop and doing selections, and specifically with this video I want to look at selecting your shadows, your highlights, and your midtones as separate selections. This can be useful for a lot of different things, particularly in alternative processes and with color in particular. We'll look at using this for gum printing, but we'll also apply it and explore a little bit of this concept with our split tone, trying to replicate split tone prints from the darkroom. So with our selection, we're in Photoshop. We open up a color file, and I have my layers here. I almost always have my layer palette open, so I'm going to hide that for the second, and we will go to select. Most of our adjustments are done under image adjustment, or we'll do a layer adjustment, but this one we want to select color range. And with that, I'm going to select, we'll start with the highlights here. So I want to select roughly just a little bit more than a third of the values in this image. I'm going to call those my highlights. So you see down here in the range, the top range is 255. So if we divide 255 by 3, that's 85. And so that would be 170. And I'm going to give myself a little bit more than that. I'm going to take up to 165 roughly. We'll go 164 there. So that'll be my highlight range. And you can see down here it shows you what you're selecting. And I hit OK with that, and then it selects all the values in that range. And almost always when you're doing selection, you probably need a little feathering. Feathering is also under Select, Modify, Feather. I'm just going to do a little bit of feathering, not a lot. I'm going to go for 8 pixels, just a little bit more than that cushion that I'm giving myself. Well, I don't want to go too much. I'm going to go 6 pixels because I have a 5 pixel cushion as I'm breaking this image up into thirds. So rather than selecting 170, I select 164. So you see I'm going to have this cushion feathered. Alright, so we hit OK there. And then I'm going to hit Command C, and that copies that. I'll go over to my layers, click New Layer at the bottom here, and then Paste. And then I'm going to call this Highlights. So to do that, I just double click on that name, or click once, I guess, and you have highlights. So if we turn off the base layer, now we just see the highlights. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is we will go and select the midtones. So be sure you click back on your base layer, because that's the layer you want to select from. So always be aware of that when you run into problems in Photoshop and you can't do things you think you should be able to do. First thing I always look is to make sure I'm on the proper layer. Alright, so I'm back on the background layer. I go to Select, and I go to Color Range, and this time I select Midtones. And then my midtone range, since it's 85, would be 85 to 170, but I want to take a little bit larger area than that. So as we see here, I have 80 to 169. We'll go 170 right there. And we'll hit OK. And then we'll go Select, Modify. I'm going to take just a little bit less of a feathering on this one and just do 5 pixels. And hit OK. And copy that and come down here, create a new layer, paste it in there, then call that midtones. Then we'll do the same thing with highlights. Go back to the background, we'll hit select, we'll hit color range, and we'll go shadows. And this I want 0 to 85, so maybe 90. We're at 91 right there. So we'll do that. And then select, modify, feather, and I'm going to go back to 6 here. Hit OK. And hit copy. And then I'll come here, make a new layer, paste it in that layer, and then change the name to shadows. Alright, so now I have my highlights, my midtones, and shadows. So if I turn off this background layer, ideally the image doesn't change at all. There'll probably be some change where it missed some values in the overlap, So if I unclick, oh, you can see a little bit like this rock in the foreground becomes a little bit brighter. So I could probably make an adjustment, go back into perhaps my shadows or maybe my midtones. I'd have to explore that a little bit, but I could correct it. It actually doesn't look too bad like this. So, you know, you have to make that decision. Do you need to go back, do some more work and figure out how to get those values you're missing, or is it okay to you? I think for our purposes here, we're going to leave it alone. But okay, so anyways, those are your highlights, those are your midtones, and then those are your shadows. And then when we put them all together, we've sort of rebuilt our image here, but we are missing a few values. Anyways, so this will have a lot of purposes, and it can be useful to understand.